Hi everyone, welcome. We will wait another minute and then we will start the webinar. Thank you for joining. Hi everyone, welcome to today's webinar, Automated Hardening, Augment your EDR to stay ahead of faster threats. My name is Ana Diaconu, Senior Integrated Campaigns Manager at Bitdefender, and I will be your host today. It's my pleasure to welcome our speaker, Cristian Iordache, Gravity Zone Solutions Director. Now, before we start, a few housekeeping rules. Please note that you are muted as we are recording this webinar. We will provide access to it within the next couple of days after this session. Throughout the presentation, we encourage you to ask your questions as Christy is going to answer them at the end of his presentation. And now I'm passing it over to you, Christy.
Thank you, Anna, and hello, everyone. Thanks for joining. So a little bit about me before we get started. I've been working in cybersecurity for about 15 years. And right now, I'm responsible for the market strategy of Bitdefender preventative solutions for businesses. So this means understanding the challenges our customers face. It means understanding the threat landscape and understanding how our solutions address these challenges and the evolving threat landscape. So today we're going to talk about automated hardening and why it's important to augment your EDR to stay ahead of faster threats. And let's just dive right in. What we are seeing when we look at the threat landscape is attacks need several weaknesses to succeed. And this can be a combination of weaknesses that allow an attack to succeed. You can have multi-factor authentication disabled. You can have an OS or a third-party application that is unpatched. You can have certain ports open or certain legitimate tools that are being abused and are accessible once an attacker has compromised a user or a system. And you can see this in all major attacks. So I can think back to WannaCry attacks, to NotPetya, and a combination of these things that you see on screen, such as SMB, V1 open, OS unpatched, and certain other misconfigurations are what allowed these attacks to succeed. So obviously hardening and fixing these misconfigurations makes it much more difficult for attackers to succeed. And the ideal setup for security in this context is being able to harden and to prevent threats, as many threats as possible in the early stages. So being able to filter threats at this stage before they hit the systems. Then having strong protection capabilities that are able to block threats once they execute. So you can think of email security, mobile security, endpoint protection, and so on. And of course, detection and response is crucial to deal with the threats that do manage to evade the previous layers of protection and prevention. One of the things that we are seeing, and it's part of the reason for today's session, is because hardening and prevention are manual and they require a lot of work, often they are overlooked and organizations rely or have hope as a strategy. They hope that detection and response will block threats in time and will keep them from being in the headlines for a potential breach. Now, the challenge is that what we are seeing right now is attackers are even faster. They are automating portions of their attack, and then we see active hacking. And attacks are increasingly AI-enabled. So that means keeping up with the speed of attacks just with detection and response is unsustainable. That's why this discussion about hardening is even more timely. Now, when we look at analysts such as Gartner, they see the same thing happening in the industry. So Gartner talks about preemptive cybersecurity, which you can consider essentially as a new generation of more intelligent prevention or hardening or attack surface reduction. And Gartner mentions that organizations that don't put in place these new and more effective layers of hardening and prevention are courting disaster. They also mention that why this is the case, it's because the increasing speed and sophistication of AI-enabled threats is destroying the reliability of standalone detection and response cybersecurity methods. And these are just some of the quotes. There are more materials, more reports. If you want to go check them out, I recommend it to learn about this new generation of prevention technologies in the end that are able to stop attacks earlier without burdening the IT departments and without slowing productivity. Now, one of the reasons that we, again, are talking about hardening is that we run quite a lot of incident investigations and forensic analysis being called by customers or by public entities to investigate. And in the past, over the past 3 years, I can say that virtually every breach that we've investigated included abuse by attackers of native tools that are pre-installed on Windows systems, such as PowerShell, such as VMIC, BitSadmin, and so on, in order to evade detection, in order to stay under the radar. This prompted us to do an extensive research, an extensive analysis into 700,000 security incidents, and this revealed that 84%, so a staggering amount of these incidents, contained this native tool abuse as a technique that was involved at least once, at least with one part of the attack chain. And this is the case not just with Windows, it's the same. These legitimate tools are being abused on Mac and on Linux. And even though you might be familiar with a number of such tools, there are actually 133 unique binaries with known abuse methods in a fresh Windows 11 install. And there are different instances, close to 1,000 across the system. So this just gives you an idea of the scale of the problem. And we believe it's one of the most important challenges in cybersecurity right now. Organizations are not able to properly harden these tools that can be used maliciously. And another point of view, but looking at the same reality, in this quote from the leader, allegedly from the leader of a ransomware group, they mentioned that their internal way of operating was to use standard utilities in order not to be detected. So they never relied on using custom malware as part of their attacks. And you can view this as just a a celebration or a declaration of victory as long as they stick to these tools. They know that they can rely on them. They know that they are going to be accessible because systems are not going to be hardened enough. So what the next question for us was, what are the challenges with manual hardening, with hardening in general? What is keeping organizations from actually closing down, locking down these tools that we see are so often being abused? And the challenge, the primary challenge, is not that IT admins, IT directors, security staff are not aware of this abuse. It's not something new, only the scale is something new. But the challenge lies in being able to manage the process and to manage it on a periodic basis while attacks keep changing and the environment, the infrastructure keeps changing at the same time. So a simplified view of a process of hardening, in this case, involves identifying some baselines for hardening, what you want to lock down, what you don't want to lock down, reviewing these baselines and agreeing on them internally, then applying the changes. And at certain times, this cycle needs to repeat and these changes need to be revisited as, again, as infrastructure and threats changed. So the challenges are identifying the baseline can also be tedious, especially for IT teams. What best practices you want to rely on. These best practices are typically behind actual attacks and the way TTPs are being shaped. Again, most organizations cannot keep up with the changes, and it's a slow process that involves human error. Most teams are quite lean. They are spread thin, and this means that they cannot allocate enough time to properly go through this process, to do it with high enough frequency in order for the hardening to be effective. So this is one of the challenges related to the process itself. Now, the other challenge comes from looking at the tools and how these tools are configured, what they are enabling regarding the hardening today. So it's one of the first things that we noticed actually is that it's very difficult or close to impossible to balance security, productivity, and manageability. So typically what we see is organizations are using some form of allow listing security tools or attack surface reduction rules, and these rules are invariably static. That means that they need to be updated at regular intervals. That means that exceptions are set up and often they are forgotten. And with the number of exceptions to the hardening rules growing, organizations just cannot manage at some point, and it becomes an administrative nightmare. The second problem we see with conventional tools is that they're typically one size fits all. So they work the same way, implement the same hardening across an organization, or they implement the same hardening rules across a department. Here, the challenge is that even employees in the same department don't need the same tools. They don't work in the same way. So implementing more restrictive hardening often means that you reduce productivity for some of the workers. And that's why often organizations choose to prioritize productivity, and they just go with the most limited hardening rules possible to avoid negative impact. A third problem is solutions are too blunt and they just go by denying or allowing a certain tool to run. And this again can impact productivity. And another challenge is that organizations don't understand how these tools are actually being used in practice. Because you might have some idea of which users require PowerShell access. You might say, okay, I'm going to disable PowerShell access for my HR team. I'm going to still allow the admin team, the IT admin, to be able to use it, but not the local HR team. And this is good enough for PowerShell in certain cases, but many of these tools, I've mentioned VMIC, for example, they are not even leveraged by the users, but they are leveraged by other third-party applications that would fail if these tools are restricted. So this means that it's not so easy to say, okay, we are going to restrict this bunch of tools. And last but not least, an important problem is that these rules, even when they are inspired by best practices, they are disconnected from attacker playbooks. So the tactics, techniques that attackers use evolve rapidly, and these changes are not reflected fast enough with these tools. Now, what are the misconceptions? What do we hear actually when we're talking to IT teams or to security teams? So we're hearing a lot of teams that hope that their EDR is detecting attacks early enough and that they are protected. And they are hearing this from their vendors who mention that, okay, our solution is protecting you against living off the land techniques that abuse your legitimate tools, for instance. And it's not that this isn't true in the sense that these tools will detect the use of certain legitimate tools and will provide an alert or an incident. The challenge is that sifting through the noise and being able to investigate and to discern whether it is legitimate use or malicious use of the same Windows binary is very difficult and very slow. So it's not the correct strategy to try and chase alerts and hope to be able to catch them. Now, another thing that we hear is we have some application control technology in place and we're covered. Of course, this is very limited in terms of what it can actually block, what it can actually harden. And we hear that overall organizations or teams have some feeling that their hardening is good enough, but more often than not, they discover that there are hundreds of tools running on their systems that, or tools that could run potentially once one of their systems are compromised, and they are not aware of this security gap. Give me 1 second, please, just to have a sip of water. Okay, so understanding this reality, understanding the challenges with static hardening, with one-size-fits-all hardening, we started to look at how can we automate hardening, how can we simplify it and cut down on this attack surface that we are seeing. So what we are seeing when investigating attacks is that up to 95% of the tools that could run on one system were unnecessary for that specific user. Still, they were allowed to run. So we started looking into how we can address this challenge. And the solution we came up with, it's actually a new technology and a new type of security solution. We call it gravity zone phaser for proactive hardening and attack surface reduction. And basically, it's an AI-driven solution that profiles behavior for each and every users and is able to dynamically or automatically apply hardening across the organization. How it works is you start with enabling it or enabling the policy for phaser on a system. It takes some time to learn the behavior, to learn how the user interacts with their system. And it understands the behavior for each combination of user and machine. Then it maps the attack surface by contrasting the behaviors we observe with the active threat vectors that we are observing. And this allows phaser to identify exactly which areas of the attack surface can be restricted. We provide recommendations across a range of different categories, such as leaving off the land binaries, tampering tools, crypto miners, or remote admin tools, for instance. So we often see remote administration tools being involved in attacks. Cutting down some of the tools that are not being leveraged by the user or are not being accepted in the organization reduces the attack surface quite significantly. Now, once the recommendations are identified, organizations can choose to apply changes with direct control. So just select certain restrictions that they are comfortable with implementing. But on the other hand, they can also just select autopilot mode, which applies all the restrictions automatically without the need for someone in IT, someone in security to decide which of the restrictions to be applied, to review the restrictions and to keep updating these changes. And this is where the very significant difference comes compared to existing hardening alternatives. So phaser, by using this autopilot capability, implements continuous risk reduction. That means that as soon as the behavior of one employee changes, let's say you have some employee that was using PowerShell, they were using maybe even some coding tools that are pre-built into Windows. Let's say we're talking about a software developer. As soon as they switched to management and they're no longer leveraging these tools, phaser has already cut access to these tools on that system. That means if their system were to be compromised, an attacker cannot use these tools to remain hidden and to be stealthy while they progress their attack. And the impact for IT teams and for security teams is that they don't need to worry about continuously reviewing configurations, understanding which is the best configuration, and regularly revising or reviewing these configurations. They can just trust the autopilot to constantly learn the behavior and adjust immediately to behaviors, but not only behaviors, also to new threat vectors that appear. So what this actually means when we look at the outcome is security no longer depends on perfect decisions. So it doesn't depend on guesswork. Often we see teams that don't have the deep security knowledge deciding which restrictions to implement, which best practices to implement. So we can remove this part of guesswork. We can remove the human error. So for instance, forgetting to go back to fix an exception. And we can remove the manual effort, which is actually the challenge. It's the reason most organizations are not implementing proper hardening. It's not that they're unaware, it's just the scale of the effort required to be able to do it. So what is the difference between Phaser direct control and Phaser autopilot, and how do customers use both of these options? So with direct control, of course, you can review the different recommendations. You can understand how each of these recommendations, let's say restricting PowerShell for 30% of your users, you can understand how much it's going to impact your overall risk. Then you decide to apply the recommendations, and you can revisit these recommendations. Phaser will also update them when behaviors change. Now, what we see is that often organizations will start in direct control mode in order to understand what is their attack surface, what is their security gap around legitimate tools. Then they will experiment with some restrictions just to be sure that they are not impacting productivity, they are not blocking any legitimate activity. And then what we tend to see is that as they start experimenting with autopilot, they end up applying it more and more, and in the end, applying autopilot over the key categories of solutions. So what this means on autopilot is that they don't need to go back, they don't need to review, they don't need to spend time going one by one across these areas and deciding which one to implement. And again, this is where a lot of customers report the benefit and report the fact that they see the difference compared to manual or static hardening. So one of the answers, that one of the objections, one of the worries or concerns that is quite common when we talk about automating hardening is, we've heard this before. We've been promised something like this. There are a lot of vendors talking about automating hardening, talking about automating actually every part of cybersecurity. And often this is not really the case in practice. So when you actually deploy these solutions, they fall short of the expectations. So that is why, again, we see this skepticism, and I think it's quite a pragmatic and it's quite a normal approach to have. What I can say, and what we do say to teams that are having these concerns, is that in reality, up to 90% or around 90% of our customers are actually managing to use Phaser on autopilot. So it's not just a feature that exists there and a limited number of customers are using. It's the preferred way of using Phaser. Second, we don't see reports of disruptions or effort coming from the customers. We have certain customer stories that reflect this, and we have trials and POCs, and we often, I would say all the time, encourage customers to test it in their environment, to test it slowly, so that they can be sure that they are not breaking anything related to their environments. Now, one of these examples, one of these customer case studies that I mentioned is this one from Greenman Pedersen in the US. So they deployed Phaser and they saw close to 70% reduction of their attack surface. And this was just by locking down unnecessary binaries and remote tools, remote administration tools. What they've seen is that they were able to move from discovering their overall risk, their attack surface, to blocking these legitimate but risky tools within weeks. So they got a very fast return on their investment. And they were able to verify that Phaser works when they ran one of their pen test exercises. They saw that Phaser was actually blocking the tools that were being used in the pen test. Now, this is another very important use case for Phaser and where the automation comes into play, why it's even more important. So what we see is that attackers are often trying to get a trial to get one instance of a product, whether it's an endpoint security, EDR, XDR product, doesn't matter. They're trying to get one instance of that product and they're trying to bypass it within a controlled lab environment until they're able to figure a way to bypass the security and to not trigger any alarms. Once they are able to do this in a controlled environment, they are able to attack, most often in a targeted attack. They're able to compromise organizations that are using that type of security solution. So they're able to do this because the hardening configuration looks the same in their lab environment and for each of the users. This is what we were talking about when mentioning one-size-fits-all hardening. They're able to reliably use the same playbook across different users, and they know that it will most likely be successful. Now, the way a company protected by Phaser works is each of the users has their own individual hardening. So based on the behavior of that specific user, the hardening is going to look different and the security is going to behave differently. Not only that, so this of course already makes it almost impossible to be able to use the same bypass technique across systems. But with Phaser, how hardening works in practice is that the elements that are being hardened just continuously update, continuously change. So this is how hardening looks in practice, and this is the dynamic element that we are talking about. This is the difference versus having static updates that might be happening 2 times a year. Now, with that, we were talking about the need for hardening solutions to augment EDR or endpoint security solutions that you might be using at this point. So endpoint security application control tools are very good at preventing some threats. They have certain prevention layers, and you might be using already certain layers such as patch management. They are providing automated remediation. They are quite inefficient at blocking legitimate tools. They are quite inefficient when it comes to detection and response speed. And overall, security efficiency has to suffer when relying only or primarily on detection and response. Now, where dynamic hardening or automated hardening comes into play is it addresses exactly these cybersecurity gaps. So that means you're able to block up to 95% of the attack paths and legitimate tools. This influences and reduces the detection and response speed, because attacks can be blocked much earlier and detection and response is much more focused, much less noise. And overall, this means improved efficiency throughout the IT and security teams. So this means, in reality, improving the overall value and the overall return on existing EPP and EDR solutions. And often, because it's very difficult to switch from these solutions, this means very low friction. You don't need to go with a full endpoint security solution or platform from Bitdefender. Of course, you can do that, and we recommend it for most customers. Now, what are the outcomes that customers tend to see after deploying this automated hardening? They see that they stop attacks earlier. They see that they're able to cut their attack surface by up to 95%. And they're able, very importantly, to provide the statistics, to provide the dashboards to their leadership and justify their investment, justify the return on this investment very quickly. And they're able to boost overall efficiency by up to 50%. Now, I mentioned, and we started framing the discussion around the fact that attacks are faster and they are more AI enabled. And this is what is actually making it crucial for organizations to focus not on endpoint detection and response, as the industry has been doing in the past 5 years, let's say, or more than 5 years, but to go back and to look at preemptive cybersecurity, look at more intelligent ways to stop attacks and to harden systems earlier. And what we are seeing, this is a recent blog post that we've published, I think just last week. We were looking into AI-generated malware, and this is an area, of course, where there is a lot of confusion. There are a lot of discussions being had around what AI threats actually look like and what are the pragmatic ways to protect against the threats that we are actually seeing today. And what we are seeing at this moment is that attacks are starting to leverage more and more Gen AI. This doesn't mean that they are smarter. Typically, these attacks are not very evolved. They are using different techniques, such as using languages like NIM, Zig, and Crystal that are not very common. And again, they're using legitimate tools. They're abusing these tools because they can rely on them to be available. Now, what we expect to see in the future is that as attacks become even faster with Gen AI being harnessed more and more by attackers, again, the importance of stopping attacks earlier only increases, and the importance of hardening just goes up. And if you're interested in this topic, if you're interested in what we are seeing around AI attacks, what are the types of AI attacks that we are seeing, there is a webinar that we are going to have dedicated to this in the end of March, I believe 26th of March. So I recommend you check it out. Now, one of the examples of attacks that are very popular and very dangerous, yet quite simple to implement, and we've seen it spread starting last year, is attacks such as quick fix. So you can see here one example of this attack scenario. You have the attack that starts with a fake CAPTCHA on a compromised website. What this fake CAPTCHA does is it tricks the user into clicking. It loads a JavaScript that loads a command into the user's clipboard. Then the user is convinced to click Windows R and to run a PowerShell command that was previously copied into their clipboard. Now, this PowerShell command runs as a hidden window and downloads the payload to be able to make the attack successful. And you can see here that attacks like quick fix are highly common, and 47% of all observed attacks, according to Microsoft's report. So where Phaser would come into play is it would disable this attack by blocking PowerShell before it can run. And of course, we're coming to the end of today's session. We've focused a lot on hardening against legitimate tool abuse, but hardening is much broader than this. We've just focused on this area because it's one of the most significant gaps that we see today. But at the same time, as we mentioned, attacks are exploiting a combination or a series of weaknesses, not just one weakness. So that means it's important to have security controls to be able to patch and to automate patching as much as possible. And this is something to look into. You want to look into addressing misconfigurations in a simple way as much as possible. You want to look at web servers and shadow IT. These are very common attack entry points, and solutions such as exposure attack surface management address this. Increasingly, we are seeing risks connected to AI misuse. Employees providing confidential data or AI being abused as part of cyber attacks. And we're seeing cloud workloads, of course, being involved in attacks and cloud misconfigurations. And cloud security posture management tools are able to harden and to reduce these attack surfaces. Overall, the discipline and the process that can be built and should be built around hardening and reducing the attack surface has to do with risk management, with continuous threat exposure management. And when these frameworks, these programs are mapped to certain compliance mandates, this can reduce the risk while ensuring that your organization is meeting certain standards, certain regulations such as ISO 27001 and so on. And the way that we can address this beyond Phaser, beyond legitimate tools, is we have one platform that combines the key attack surface reduction capabilities across these areas. And this means that it provides visibility in one platform. It provides intelligent prioritization because we know organizations are struggling with too many vulnerabilities to fix. So they need to understand which one of these vulnerability they should address first, which one could actually lead to an attack. And as much as possible, we are trying to automate remediation across all of these layers. We are not there yet, but we're trying to automate, we're trying to simplify as much as possible remediation. And this is the vision going forward. And with that, I hope you've enjoyed and you found useful today's session. If you are interested to get more resources, to learn more about the investigations that I mentioned, to learn more about the research that I've just mentioned earlier into 700,000 security incidents and how tools are being abused, how legitimate tools are being abused, just scan this code or go to bitdefender.com/phaser. And with that, we can switch into looking at the questions that you've submitted so far. Give me 1 second to open the questions pane and start looking at your questions. If you haven't submitted your question, please do so at this point. And I will have another sip of water. So one of the first questions, can Phaser follow a user that works across multiple devices and harden the device based on which user is logged on? So I like this question because this is actually an easy answer. This is how Phaser was designed. So it doesn't follow just the user, but it tracks and it builds a profile for each combination of user and machine. So if you are using your own system, but you're also using a server, you will have very different profiles on your laptop versus the server. And you can also get the situation where you have multiple users, multiple persons while using the same machine. Again, this builds individual combinations of user and machine. What is the architecture of what AI architecture is Phaser built upon? So this is a very, very deep technical discussion, and it's something that we can go into detail. Not right now. I can tell you, Phaser is not using generative AI. So it's built on the experience that we have in using deep learning AI technologies throughout the years. It's built on the experience that we have in understanding anomalous behaviors. And these technologies are therefore very accurate in understanding what a user needs and what they don't need. You don't get, for instance, the challenges that you see with generative AI solutions that just try to guess and often hallucinate the recommendations. Okay, I see many more questions streaming in. How to enable Phaser manually for testing? So if you want to test Phaser, first step is to get a license key to be able to test it. You can just, we can reach out to you. You can let us know if you are ready to test Phaser. Once you deploy it, it takes just a few minutes to deploy it, whether it is as part of Bitdefender or alongside any competitive tool. Once you've deployed it, you can set the policy and you can set it in direct control. So that means that you are just testing Phaser You are not impacting your systems in any way. It's not taking any restriction. It is just showing you exactly what it found, but you need to give it a period of learning which takes between 20 to 40 days to understand the behaviors and to populate the attack surface dashboard. Does Phaser reside on physical endpoint? Yes, Phaser requires an endpoint agent that resides on the physical endpoint. Will there be a recording of this session? Yes, there will be a recording. How is Phaser licensing? So Phaser is being licensed by the number of endpoints that are protected. Okay. When will Phaser support Mac and Linux as well? So this is something that we are working on. We've started working on this. It's something that I would say is coming this year, quite in the near future, but I cannot provide an exact date at this point. Do we contact you directly for trial or do we go to distributor? You can contact me directly. We can involve the distributor as well. So we will reach out to you. Is Phaser included in any bundle at this point? So at this point, Phaser is not included in any bundle. It's an add-on that you can activate alongside your product, your package from Bitdefender, or alongside third-party solutions. Does it support Android or iOS? At this point, no, it doesn't support Android, iOS. I cannot give you the details, but due to the success, due to the interest that we've seen so far around Phaser, around this type of hardening approach, we plan to extend it more. But again, I cannot provide all the details aside from mentioning that we will make it available for Mac and Linux. And with that, I think I've covered all of the questions that we've gotten so far. If you have more questions, just reach out to us. We're happy to get back to you and to continue the conversation.
Thank you so much, Christy, and thanks to our audience. Great questions. We will follow up in the upcoming days with the webinar recording, the presentation. We will also include the link to the webinar that Christy was mentioning that will take place on the 26th of March on Offensive AI. And I would like to thank you all for joining us today. See you in our upcoming sessions. Have a great day. Bye-bye.